The morning air over the French lines hung heavy with gun smoke, the kind that clung to a soldier's lungs and made every breath feel like a reminder of the war's weight. On the 21st of July 1918, near the battered outskirts of Baccarat, a German patrol dragged in an American prisoner carrying a weapon they had never seen before. It was short, rugged, almost unremarkable until they held it, studied its steel, and realized it wasn't built for the open fields of Europe, but for the cramped, suffocating geometry of the trenches. The shotgun looked nothing like the elegant rifles European doctrine worshipped. It was blunt, brutal, and terrifyingly practical. In a world where soldiers met at 5 meters, where corners decided life and death, this simple American tool rewrote what close-quarters combat meant. Why did such an ordinary weapon unsettle the German general staff so deeply? And how did a design rooted in American farms and police stations become one of the most feared instruments of the First World War? To understand that, we must step into the darkness of the trenches and watch how a familiar weapon shattered an old world of military tradition. Long before the Germans filed a diplomatic protest, the problem had already taken shape in the mud-choked trenches of the Western Front. 3 years of war had turned northern France into a maze of narrow ditches, sandbagged corners, and sudden blind turns where men fought at distances so close they could hear each other breathe. Rifles designed for open fields felt awkward here. Machine guns required setup, grenades lacked precision, and bayonets demanded more courage than most men could summon after days without sleep. The battlefield had changed, but Europe's weapons had not. American observers arriving in 1917 saw the truth instantly. They watched British and French soldiers grapple their way through shattered trench lines, fighting with clubs, knives, even entrenching tools when rifles became useless. What they witnessed was not the elegant warfare imagined by old doctrine, but a brutal, instinctive struggle for survival at 10 meters or less. The question was simple: what weapon truly belonged in such a place? Back in the United States, a civilian engineer named William G. Eager believed he knew the answer. Eager was not a general, not even a soldier, just a mechanical mind who read the war reports with growing clarity. Where others saw chaos, he saw a technical problem. If trench combat happened at the distance of a living room, then a weapon built for hunting deer or quail would be devastating against a man. In the fall of 1917, he assembled his findings into a meticulous engineering report. Shorten the barrel, he argued, add a heat shield to protect the soldier's hand, fit a bayonet lug, use the reliable pump-action designs that American hunters trusted. His proposal was bold, practical, and utterly unbound by European military tradition. General John J. Pershing, then preparing the American Expeditionary Forces for combat in France, read Eager's report with interest. Pershing had seen shotguns used effectively before against Moro fighters in the Philippines, where combat was fast, sudden, and intimate. He approved the idea immediately. Within weeks, Winchester and Remington received contracts to modify commercial shotguns for military use. The resulting weapons were simple, sturdy, and terrifyingly effective inside the tight walls of a trench. When the first 5,000 trench guns arrived in France in early 1918, most were assigned to guard prisoners. But 1,000 were quietly distributed across combat units, 10 or 20 per regiment, to see how they would perform where it mattered most. And soon, on the battered line near Seicheprey, American soldiers discovered that Eager had been right. The shotgun did not ask for precision. It demanded only presence, a quick movement, a steady pump of the action, and the courage to advance into darkness where an enemy might be waiting around the next corner. In those first fights, something shifted. The Americans were no longer adapting to the trenches, they were shaping them. By the spring and summer of 1918, the trench gun had shifted from an experiment to a quiet transformation happening inside the American line. Reports from the front, whispered at first, began to describe something different, an unfamiliar kind of confidence spreading among the soldiers who carried the short-barreled weapons. They felt it in their hands when the fog rolled in and shapes moved beyond the wire. They felt it when German stormtroopers, seasoned by years of trench assaults, tried to close the distance that once ensured their success. The Battle of Seicheprey had offered the first glimpse, but the dense woods of Belleau Wood revealed the shotgun's true nature. Visibility collapsed to mere feet. Trees, smoke, and shattered branches broke every line of sight. German infantry advanced in tight formations, trusting their discipline and experience. Yet every time a shotgun fired, 3 or 4 men dropped. The spread of buckshot turned clustered movement into fatal vulnerability. The closer the Germans huddled for protection, the deadlier the weapon became. American officers quickly noted that shotgun-equipped squads advanced through trench segments with a speed the Germans had not anticipated. Clearing positions that once required deliberate movement now took minutes. A man with a trench gun did not need to pause for sight picture or steady breathing. He needed only to recognize movement, point, and fire 9 pellets, sweeping a meter-wide path in front of him. In fighting that demanded decisions in fractions of a second, this changed everything. The weapon's effect went beyond the physical. German letters intercepted by Allied intelligence spoke of the shotgun's sound deeper than a rifle, heavier, almost mechanical. Soldiers described the dread that settled over a position once that sound echoed through the trench. It wasn't just fear of death, it was fear of helplessness. Against rifles, a man could duck. Against artillery, he could hide. Against gas, he could mask. But against a shotgun at 10 meters, there was nothing to do. American divisions reported similar patterns. Officers recommended increasing allocations, 50 shotguns per regiment, 2 per squad, sometimes more for specialized assault teams. Patrols moved more decisively. Counterattacks broke sooner. German stormtrooper formations, usually so precise, dissolved under the abrupt violence of close-range volleys. Yet the Americans were not reckless with their new advantage. They integrated the trench gun into a growing combined arms approach, rifles engaging distant targets, machine guns suppressing strong points, and shotgun men taking the lead when trenches, dugouts, or bunkers needed to be seized. In this role, the weapon became more than a tool. It became a bridge between raw firepower and the brutal intimacy of trench fighting. For the first time in years, German troops found themselves facing an opponent who not only matched their mastery of close combat, but exceeded it. And in that moment, as the balance shifted, the German high command realized they needed a response, one that would come not from the battlefield, but from the diplomatic desk. As American shotgun squads carved their way through trench systems with startling efficiency, the German response arrived from an unexpected direction, not through a new weapon, not through altered tactics, but through a formal diplomatic protest. On the 19th of September 1918, with their armies straining under Allied pressure, German officials delivered a message through Switzerland, accusing the United States of violating the Hague Convention. The shotgun, they argued, caused unnecessary suffering. The real message lay between the lines. The weapon was working too well. The protest came with a threat that shocked even seasoned diplomats. Germany declared that any American soldier captured carrying a shotgun or its ammunition would forfeit his life. It was a sentence of execution, an attempt to terrify American troops into abandoning the weapon that had begun to undermine Germany's hard-won dominance in close combat. But the threat only revealed how deeply the trench gun had unsettled the German general staff. Armies confident in their doctrine do not resort to legal maneuvering to ban a single infantry weapon. In Washington, the War Department turned to Acting Judge Advocate General Brigadier General Samuel T. Ansel. His 5-page memorandum dismantled Germany's argument with surgical precision. Shotguns had long been used in warfare, from the blunderbuss to the Philippine campaigns. Their projectiles were no more cruel than pistol rounds and far less destructive than the gas and flamethrowers introduced by Germany itself. Ansel noted that Germany had protested none of these weapons when they served its interests. The protest, he wrote, was destitute of good faith, a diplomatic veneer for a tactical problem. Secretary of State Robert Lansing responded with equal clarity. The United States rejected the protest entirely. The shotgun was lawful, effective, and would remain in service. And if Germany executed an American prisoner for carrying one, the United States would take reprisals as would best protect American forces. The message was delivered without threat in tone, but unmistakable in meaning. Retaliation would be swift and symmetrical. Copies of Lansing's reply were sent to Allied governments, signaling more than legal resolve. It signaled that the United States would not be intimidated by psychological warfare. Within weeks, Germany fell silent. There was no counter-argument, no escalation, no attempt to follow through on their threat. Not a single American prisoner was harmed for carrying a shotgun. The protest had collapsed under its own contradictions. But the aftermath revealed something deeper. German stormtroopers reported that their once reliable assault methods, closing to grenade range, then charging with bayonets and rifle fire, no longer worked against American trenches defended by shotguns. German units described the feeling of advancing into a wall of invisible pellets, the sudden collapse of formations, the psychological shock of hearing the weapon's heavy report echo through the corridors of Earth. In the final months of the war, as trench systems cracked and the German army retreated, the protest faded into a footnote. But its meaning endured. Germany had not feared the shotgun because it violated the laws of war. They feared it because it erased the advantage they had spent 4 years refining, and because it came from a nation willing to question the assumptions that Europe had long taken for granted. From a distance, the German protest looked like a legal dispute, but to American commanders it revealed something far more telling, a clash of military cultures. European armies entered the First World War carrying the weight of centuries, traditions that shaped how they fought, how they armed their soldiers, and how they measured legitimacy on the battlefield. Rifles were the infantryman's weapon. Artillery prepared the assault. Machine guns anchored the line. Anything beyond that framework felt improper. even when the trenches had already proven those frameworks inadequate. The United States approached the war from a different angle. Its army was young, unburdened by the rigid doctrines that defined European strategy. When American officers studied the Western Front, they saw a practical problem, men fighting at the distance of a doorway, and so they chose a practical tool. The shotgun was not refined, not prestigious, not part of any established doctrine, but it worked. In that choice, the world glimpsed an early example of the American willingness to discard tradition in favor of effectiveness, a trait that would later define U.S. military innovation. The German reaction made this contrast even sharper. Rather than adapt their own tactics, Germany attempted to remove the shotgun from the battlefield through legal argument. It was an appeal to rules in a war where Germany itself had introduced chlorine gas, flamethrowers, and long-range bombing. The inconsistency was obvious to American diplomats, but it also revealed something deeper, a military establishment struggling to defend its doctrine against an unfamiliar kind of threat. When the enemy breaks the rules of your playbook not by cruelty, but by practicality, the ground shifts beneath your feet. For American troops, the shotgun became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of a broader lesson, that survival in modern war belonged not to the most traditional army, but to the most adaptable one. And as the conflict moved into the 19th year of the century that would redefine global warfare, other nations began to see it as well. Close-quarters combat in bunkers, forests, caves, and villages would become a defining feature of future wars, from the Pacific in World War II to the mountains of Korea and the jungles of Vietnam. The trench gun was not just a battlefield tool. It was a signal, a warning, that wars were changing faster than doctrines could keep up, and that those who clung too tightly to the past risked being overtaken by those willing to rethink the fight. When the guns finally fell silent in November 1918, the trenches of France held more than the debris of a shattered Europe. They held lessons hard, unpolished truths carved out of fear, courage, and the stubborn search for survival. Among those lessons was the story of a simple American shotgun, a tool that changed the rhythm of close combat not through brutality, but through clarity. It solved a problem no one else had dared to name. The Germans never forgot it. Veterans wrote years later of the dread that settled over a trench when the heavy, distinct report of a trench gun echoed through the earth. They remembered how quickly a mastered doctrine could be undone by a single idea, how an army trained for precision could be outmatched by a weapon designed for the chaotic closeness of trench warfare. Their fear was not of pain, nor of suffering, but of obsolescence. For the Americans who carried those shotguns, the weapon became something quieter yet more enduring. It represented the belief that innovation does not always come from laboratories or generals' desks. Sometimes it comes from a civilian engineer reading war reports at his kitchen table. Sometimes it comes from a soldier who refuses to accept the limits imposed by tradition. The shotgun was not elegant, but it was honest. It met the battlefield as it truly was. And in doing so, it forced others to confront the difference between what they believed war should be and what war had become. The legacy of the trench gun did not end in France. It lived on in the jungles of the Pacific, the icy trenches of Korea, the dense villages of Vietnam, wherever soldiers fought at ranges measured in steps rather than yards. Its principle remains unchanged. In close quarters, simplicity paired with decisiveness can outweigh even the most refined doctrine. And perhaps that is the question the story leaves us with today. In a world shaped by past wars and future uncertainties, what matters more, the traditions we inherit or the adaptability that keeps us alive? If this chapter of military history resonates with you, consider staying with us as we explore the conflicts, decisions, and innovations that shaped the world we live in. And tell us, what lesson do you believe the shotgun truly taught the armies of 1918? Your perspective keeps history alive.